And you're live.
Awesome! Welcome to the Renegade Society Radio Show. I am Sarah Erickson, Director of Sales and Marketing for Renegade, and I'm so excited. We have one of my favorite guests here this week, one of the most fantastic people in all of board gaming. Many of you probably know him. We have Rodney Smith from Watch It Played here with us this afternoon. So welcome, Rodney. How are you doing?
Sarah, thank you so much for the very kind introduction. I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like I haven't talked to people other than my family for a long time is what it feels like. And it's so wild seeing you because normally when I'm seeing you, it's at a convention or something, and we don't have those going on right now. So it's kind of a treat for me to get to have a meeting with you, and of course with everyone watching as well at the same time, which isn't always the case when we're having a meeting.
That is a little bit special, isn't it? I feel like that's the same way. I have so many fun memories and so many friends that I've met through board gaming, and usually that's at conventions, because I think you and I are both similar in that in our own personal home life, we're a little bit isolated. Like I live in rural Montana, you live in Prince Edward Island.
That's right, a little town called Montague in Prince Edward Island. It is quite remote, relatively speaking. So yeah, same idea.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, and we kind of expect for this to be the norm for a little while. So I'm really making an effort to try and reach out to people, have Zoom meetings, and see people on TV or in meetings like this, just to say hi and see how people are doing. So things are good? You're all happy?
Yes, yeah, things are good. We're fortunate. I mean, I suppose the perks of being in a slightly more remote area is it puts you outside of some of the traffic and travel that a lot of people are doing. So we're in a sort of a safer spot that way as it relates to COVID, but we're all doing well. My wife's a pharmacist, so she's a little bit on the front lines of this, sort of, she comes home every day, has to wash everything. My daughter actually just came home from university, so she's self-isolating for 14 days. That's mandatory here, and so she's up in her room. Just before I came down here, she was up in her room, and she's Skyping with her brother in the next room, and they're playing a game of What's My Word. So the gaming continues here, and we're even isolating in our own home that way. So
wow. Yeah. I do really love that all of us are connected through games, and I think that is so strong and so obvious right now that even though we're all apart and we have these really close friendships, we can still do the thing that we really love doing together. So
the thing that connected many of us, right? Yeah, the thing that connected many of us is still something we can keep doing. That part hasn't been sort of taken away, if you will, or that's not something we have to put aside right now as much.
Yeah, it's been really good. So have you been playing any online games?
Yeah, a little bit, actually. I took a dive back into Board Game Arena. If you're familiar with that site, they have a few different games that they have on there you can play remotely, and so I've been playing some games like Seasons, and what was another one I was playing recently? Jaipur. Don't know if you're familiar with that two-player game. Yeah. So playing a little bit of that. But the thing about my schedule is it sort of stayed the same more or less, because I always did my work kind of in isolation anyway. So I've been able to keep working. So I don't have a lot of extra time for gaming, more than usual. But I'm still finding little ways, like you said, it feels good to continue those connections with your friends through gaming, and that's one way I've been doing it. What about yourself? Have you been playing anything online?
Yeah, so I own a local game store, and so I'm used to being able to go see my friends once or twice a week and be able to play games at our store. I also have a really good friend who comes over to my house every week and plays campaign style games. So legacy games, campaign, whatever. We just finished Aftermath, actually, and we're just getting into Sherlock, the Detective Chronicles. So obviously he can't come over anymore, and my store is shut down. So all of us have been getting together on various different platforms and playing. So we've played like Architects of the West Kingdom. We had that one on Tabletopia, which was pretty exciting.
And then
I just started playing Legacy of Dragonholt with my campaign friend. So that's actually a pretty good one that we can do over Skype without a lot of. So that's been really nice. But yeah, it's a little bit challenging, but I'm glad that we have an option. What is this?
Have you seen this? Yeah,
no.
So this is Labyrinth, the adventure game. It's based on the Jim Henson's movie, And it's kind of a role-playing game. I mean, it is a role-playing game, but it's not typical in a lot of ways. First of all, it's got the dice in the book. Can you see? There's like a hole cut out here.
I love this idea so much.
That's kind of a fun little thing until they fall on the floor, which they're doing now. But it's a really straightforward role-playing system. Have you seen the movie before?
I haven't. I know it's terrible. But
don't feel
haven't.
bad. Don't feel bad. I only just watched it because of this game.
Wow.
Friend of mine, Jamie Kagi from the Secret Ball Gaming Podcast, he'd bought this book and he wanted to run it. He was a fan of the movie, and he said, "Rodney, would you join me for a game?" I said, "Sure, but let me watch the movie first, so I a little more clued into what the theme is." It's basically an adventure story where, from one scene to the next, there's not really any connection. Like, one crazy and wild obstacle is faced by the heroes, and then they defeat that or move past it, and then there's just some completely disconnected, totally bizarro new obstacle to face. And that's basically what this book is. The person who's running the game is on a particular page. This is all they need to know to sort of run that page, and then based on what the heroes do, they'll advance a certain number of pages forward, and it'll be just some other thing that you now have to face.
Interesting.
So it's interesting because all the rules for that particular segment of the adventure is just on those 2 pages. So you really can just sort of pick it up and go. And the rules are very straightforward. It's not like there's a bunch of stats and things. It's what are you carrying with you? What's a strength? What's a weakness? And that's kind of it. It's more just sort of collaborative storytelling in a lot of ways, which, of course, role-playing games are in general anyway. But it's very trimmed down. So that was something that we did play remotely, and that was pretty good.
I really like that, because I think that a lot of the time RPGs can be very intimidating, and there are a few systems out there that make it easy to jump into. I felt that way with Legacy of Dragonhold too, because I had never played any of that and just jumped straight into it with my friend online, and it was really simple and really well laid out to just move forward and start doing it. I think Nikki Valens is the designer on that, and she did an excellent job of making it easy.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate
she's a very clever
systems.
designer.
Yeah, she's great. So yeah, I really like that a lot. Cool. So I've heard a lot of people maybe didn't know that you like role-playing games, but I also learned today from Terry that you also like miniatures games, or at least painting them. Is this true?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it is. It is true. Actually, hang on one second. I'm going to I'll put in little. I'm going to put in little wooden Rodney. He's going to sit here for a second. I'll be right back. I'm going to go get one.
So, Wooden Rodney, what have you been doing to self-isolate?
This is terrible for live show. This is not what one should be doing. I'm a terrible guest. I'm sorry. Okay.
It's okay.
All right, I'm back.
I didn't tell you ahead of time. That's fair.
Okay. Wooden Rodney can go away.
Okay.
So, yeah, this is... I never get to talk about my miniature painting, so thank you, Terry, for passing this on. I paint almost never, but I am very, okay, I'll say it. I'm a little proud of the work I've done here. So I don't play a ton of miniatures games. I used to play more when I was younger. I find when I have the time to play a game, usually I find a board game's a little easier to crack into, frankly. Mm-hmm. And miniatures games, require sometimes a little more effort to just sort of keep up with all the changings in the game and all sort of thing. But I did paint up, and unfortunately, I don't know why I went and got these. Only I can really see detail in them, because if I bring them close to the screen, it's just going to go out of focus. But these are some 40K miniatures I painted up. These took a year to do. Obviously, not every day of the year was I working on them, but it was a very slow process. And then GW released this thing called contrast paints, which you might have heard of. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they're awesome.
When they were announced, I kind of thought, well, of course you know, you have a store, so you're probably very familiar with these things. When I first heard about contrast paints, the way it sounded was like you could just dip the miniature in a bucket and bring it out, and it would just look amazing. It's not quite that good, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Mm-hmm. That's a nice job. For people that don't know, contrast paints basically the viscosity of the paint causes it to run into the recesses, creating more of a shadow. It sort of leaves the surfaces where there'd be highlights normally, so it thins it out there, and then the rest of it kind of goes on a little more evenly. So it kind of creates highlights, shadows, and the normal base coat all in one swipe. So, yeah, it has sped up my painting process a little bit. But I got some Age of Sigmar stuff here and some 40K things. But Warcry is my game of choice. right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of a smaller skirmish Age of Sigmar game.
Mhm.
Very simple rule set. Like relatively speaking, you can learn it in about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and you're off to the races, which is rare for a lot of miniatures games, really.
Yeah, I've really seen that shift in miniatures games. So I started playing War Machine and Hordes, man, 14 years ago now, and
Yeah.
really liked it because previously to that, Games Workshop games were really big, really complicated, or at least they
Right.
seemed that way to me.
Lots of lookup
And
tables and yeah.
yeah, it was intimidating at least. And
Right.
then War Machine started, and at the very beginning, it was only 5 or 6 miniatures. You put them on a table and you started playing. And it wasn't that it was less complicated because there was still a lot of interesting interaction between the different pieces and a lot of rules to understand with each individual miniature, but it wasn't as much stuff on the table so you could kind of keep track of it. I feel like it did eventually grow to the point where you could either play those really enormous games or just play a few pieces on the table, which is nice to give people options.
Yeah.
But for what I see in my customers, most of them are leaning towards those more bite-sized skirmish experiences. And for board gamers, that's perfect. All of a sudden, we have all of these extra games that we can play where there's another hobby associated with them. Because I think it's tough. You look at like TCGs, and you can do the alone time where you're building your deck and you're thinking about what you're going to do in the next tournament. That's the hobby for them. And then you go and play. And for miniatures games, you can paint, you can model, you can build your army, and then you go play. But for board games, there's not really an equivalent to that. And
Yeah, you're
so
right. I suppose it's sleeving. Is sleeving the alone time for lonely gamers? I'm gonna sleeve these 300 cards tonight. Maybe
we see some
building
people do
inserts. Maybe.
like yeah, like building inserts, making their games nicer, like bleeding out their
Yeah.
games, that type of thing, because I think they crave that hobby side of the experience that board games aren't as conducive to. But
Right.
Games Workshop is smart because they started making miniatures that are now board games that you can paint and model on your own and then play a game with. And we see like Power Rangers, we see that community because we have miniatures in that game as well, spending a lot of time with their miniatures and then going and playing the game and enjoying that too. So I just think that's a great bonus for board gamers like us. So I
Yeah,
did
I
want
think
to ask
so.
about
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your miniatures because apparently you carry them around at conventions a lot, and I did not know that about you. And I had
Sometimes,
not
sometimes.
seen that.
Yes. I mean, if you come up
But
to me at a convention and go, "Show me your miniatures," I might not have any on me, but
but if you're
I
carrying around a little thing, that's probably what's in
yeah,
it,
could
right?
be. Yeah, exactly. No,
So
I think it's oftentimes because at conventions is where I might get together with a friend who's also into miniatures games and we might play something there. It kind of creates that opportunity that I don't get to do a lot around here so much. At home, there's not a big miniatures community where I am, so usually it's when I get to these conventions I get to do it. Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, that's cool. You get to have that outlet to do both sides of that hobby.
Hmm.
Nice. Well, I heard another interesting thing about you. Terry gave
Do
me
I need
all
to
the
get Do I need to get Wood and Rodney ready? Do I have to go grab something again? Let's
we'll
find
save
out.
that for this one. No, she told me, and I didn't know this, that you really like movies that
Ah.
are Canadian and maybe a little bit more obscure. So I was curious if you want to tell us about some of your favorite Canadian movies that none of us have ever heard of that we should go watch on Netflix because that's what a lot of people are doing right now.
Well, that's funny. Yeah, you know what? I think I know where Terry's come up with that one. Uh, I got tagged in one of those Facebook things, where they say list your 10. This one I think was the 10 most influential movies, from your life
Yeah.
or whatever. And I did list a number of movies that I think people probably assumed they were Canadian because they hadn't heard of them before. I think one of them
Oh,
on there was Canadian. But like maybe you've heard.
yeah.
Have you heard of the movie Brazil, for
No.
example? No. Okay.
Mm-mm.
So that's one from Terry Gilliam. I, it was really an interesting experience going through and thinking about the 10 most influential movies because a lot of people will say like, "What's your 10 favorite movies?" And this wasn't the same kind of list, For me, for example, in the case of the movie Brazil, which some of the people watching might be familiar with, that one. I guess I don't want to spoil things. That one ended in. I'll just say it this way. That one ended in a way that surprised me. It was like unlike any movie I'd ever seen before up to that point in my life, and
Mhm.
the ending kind of made me go, "You can end a movie that way," and it just sort of opened up my sort of viewing experience to not every movie ties up in a nice, neat little bow at the end, kind of thing, which is what I had kind of experienced up to that point in my life. I think one of the Canadian movies I did list, though, is one I don't really want to talk about, but I feel like I must now. Okay, so it's a movie called The Peanut Butter Solution. I hope you haven't heard of this movie because no one should ever watch this movie. The reason why it was so influential to me, again, not the list of my favorite movies. This is far and away not one of my favorite movies. This scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. This was like mandatory viewing in school, I suppose, because it was a Canadian movie. And it was presented, if you go look at the trailers, especially the American trailers, because it's released in America as well, it has almost kind of like a Goonies vibe to it. The music is kind of whimsical, and it seems like it's a bunch of kids getting up to shenanigans and antics and ha-ha-has, and this is going to be fun. No, this is a terrifying movie. This is a scary movie where kids' hair falls off of their heads because they get so terrified, and then I'm going to spoil it because no one should watch this movie.
Okay, do it.
Then, like, these ghosts give the children a formula that if they follow it and they smear it on their heads, their hair will grow back. And so the kid does it, but he puts way too much peanut butter in the solution because it's called the peanut butter solution. And his hair starts to grow, and it keeps growing, and it keeps growing. It won't stop. And then he gets kidnapped by this crazy old professor who's kidnapped all these kids with hair that's growing much too long, and he's like collecting the kids so he can cut all the hair. I don't know what he's doing with the hair. He's selling the hair or something, maybe making wigs with it. It's like a child labor camp. It's the weirdest. I saw this in school when I was young. I couldn't sleep for weeks. It was terrifying.
What did it do to you? That sounds awful. Were they preparing you for their own plans?
I don't know. I think this is why, there's this rumor that Canadians are nice, right? I think this is where it all comes from, because when I saw that movie, I just swore from that day forward I would be a good little Canadian boy. I would never do anything wrong. I'd be nice to everyone and just hope that I'm never forced to watch that movie again, that I would never be punished again. That was just terrifying.
This is the answer to why you're so nice. So what you're saying is everyone who has kids at home right now who's having trouble with them, they need to make the kids watch this movie.
Let your kids grow up and be terrible. Don't make them watch this movie. Please. It's not horrible.
I don't know. This sounds like some good training protocol going on.
Terrible. I don't know why Terry wanted me to relive that, honestly. It was, yeah.
No, that really does sound quite terrifying. So have you read The Golden Compass?
Yeah,
the book?
Interesting question. I haven't read it. I started reading it. I was really enjoying it. I just didn't finish it for whatever reason. Like all the rest. Have you read it?
Yeah, and it reminds me of this. It was really quite terrifying. Like these little kids get wrapped up and this horrible thing happens to them. I don't know why this keeps happening to kids. Why do we want this as entertainment? We should all be playing board games instead.
Right, exactly. Maybe that's what drove me to board games, really. No one's going to make me put peanut butter on my head when I'm playing this board game. That's probably what. Yeah.
Hilariously, I did just give my dog a bone with peanut butter in it so that he would leave me alone. So there are good uses for peanut butter, but not on your head.
That's a sensible place for it, in your mouth, to eat it. Absolutely. I got no problem with that, Sarah. You'll get no complaints from me. What about you? Was there any particular movies? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you think of any particular movies that were sort of impactful to you? That you remember sort of being moved, or maybe it changed your taste in movies or helped define your taste in movies?
I would say Fight Club. I know that's kind of cliche for the late 90s, but
no, it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great pick.
That movie was awesome. And it felt the same way you did when you were talking about Brazil. At the end, it just wasn't what you expected at all. It was just that kind of thing that blows your mind and really makes you think about what could happen in movies and how it was not what you expected, but it was really neat. And I just really liked the way that Chuck Palahniuk wrapped it all up. And he actually does a lot of really neat stuff. Have you read any of his other books?
Look, I'm just impressed that you were able to pronounce his last name so easily. I always trip over it when I try. Like, I fall on my face trying to pronounce that name. So, well done. I have not read his books, but that movie also was, that was one I considered for my list, frankly. Mm-hmm. And I think I put it on at the end saying that it was a movie that reinforced my enjoyment of certain movies. It wasn't one that necessarily was like the one I saw that maybe, because again, Brazil was probably more that one for me, right? But that Fight Club was just another one in that type of genre movie that reinforced these are the kind of movies I like, But I haven't read any of his books.
So
How do you think they compare?
I think they're all really, really interesting and really change the way you think about society in really specific aspects. So he did another one, and oh, I wish I remembered the name of it, but it's about rabies. And so it's essentially if you take rabies and infect people in the way that we're sort of seeing the COVID-19 pandemic right now, then it would be this story. But on top of that is a layer of nighttime workers and daytime workers and the struggle between those two shifts and how that affects this weird other like zombie sort of rabies thing that's happening in their society at the same time. And so it's kind of a relevant book to read right now. I'm thinking about going back and finding it again. It's interesting. He has another one about someone who grows up Amish and then is sent into regular society and how they deal with that. And it's also really not what you would expect at all, but very well done. So, and all of the things you would expect from Chuck Palahniuk, where, oh yeah, this seems like a simple, straightforward story but then it has all these twists and turns that are fun.
Right.
So yeah, I recommend it.
Do you read a lot of books? Like I'm asking that, and I'm picturing right now my bedside table. My wife walks by there and goes, "Boy, you got a lot of books on there that you're not reading." And I have a stack of I don't know, I think it's close to, maybe it's 10 books now that are sitting on there, maybe a little more than that. I have good intentions to read, but I don't I'm reading rule books is what I'm primarily reading when I have downtime. But I want to be reading more. Do you read a bunch?
So I have not read as much recently as I should be. It really does relax me and make me feel better when I fall asleep at night if I can read a little bit before. But to be honest, I love reading, but I'm very slow. And I don't have a great explanation for that, but I do read very slowly. And so I really get into a book. And when I like it, I think about every single aspect of my life and how it relates to that book, almost to the point where it's like too much. But I do really like reading. All of the books on my bedside table right now are dog training books because I just really enjoy dog training. And I find the books about them to be really, really interesting, especially as how they relate to my relationships with other people, because dogs are really just a distilled version of our relationships with each other. If you can understand how to interact with another being that doesn't have the same expectations that you do, that doesn't have the same language as you do, and you can build a relationship that works and you can communicate with each other, I feel like you can do that with people too. And so I take a lot of what I've learned from dog training and try and use that in my daily life with other people.
That's interesting. When you started talking about that, I was like, how are you going to connect this to dealing with people? Because I couldn't see it at first, right? Because I'm thinking, dogs, another species. It's like it's not the same thing, but it's interesting. Oftentimes when we're dealing with other people, it sometimes feels like we're talking to someone who's on another planet. Like we don't know how to connect. And so there is an interesting analog there. Because if you can accomplish that with, say, a dog or an animal, of course, it's not going to always be perfect parallels there, but there are some skills, right? Oh, patience, empathy, seeing things from another creature's perspective or another person's perspective. I suppose there's a lot of translations there.
Oh, a ton. So here's a really specific one. So let's say I am your manager and I ask you to do something and you don't do it. So with a dog, if I ask my dog to roll over and he doesn't do it, as a trainer, I need to look at that and figure out why, if I really want that to happen. So first I ask myself, did I actually ask him to do the thing that I wanted? And so if I was waving my arms wildly around and saying roll over, well, he didn't know, I wasn't asking for the right thing. Or if my body language was saying go over here and he goes that way, well, then maybe my body language wasn't what I thought it was. So that's the first thing I look at. Then you ask yourself, has he been trained to do the thing that I asked? If I ask him to roll over, but I've never taught him that before, of course he's not going to do that. Same thing with a person. They have to be trained to do an action you want them to do. Then you can think, are they physically able to do this thing? So I can't ask him to jump 10 feet because he can't do that. If I ask you to do a thing at a convention right now, well, you can't do it because you can't physically be at a convention. or whatever that task is. And then, are you motivated to do it? So if I ask my dog to do something, but every time he starts doing it, I yell at him, or he doesn't want to do a thing because he doesn't know why he would do it. If I haven't given him any treats, I haven't motivated him to do that, then he's not going to. And that's truly the same with people. All four of those things, I think, are directly related to every interaction you have as a manager and an employee when something doesn't happen the way that you expect it to. So if you can break it down and figure out what one of those you're doing wrong, then you can fix it easier.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you have a stack of dog training books that really kind of translate into how to deal with people. Because I can see that. You explain that really well. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. People do need the proper motivation. They need to know why they're doing it. They need to be properly trained in it first. And so oftentimes when there's that breakdown in communication between people, especially managers and employees, but also in friendships, it's often related to those things ultimately, right?
Yeah, it really helps to break it down because I think it's more obvious with a dog when you don't get what you want with them, why that's happening, and not as obvious.
It's probably easier to be objective too. When you use the example of a dog, it's easier than when you're in the heat of an argument with a friend. But if you can kind of abstract it that way, you can kind of go, okay, my friend has similar needs. I need to be more patient. I need to listen to what they're saying. I need to try to figure out how to bridge that gap. Am I being clear about what I want? All those things. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
So I also just really like dog training. So that's kind of my thing. But...
Fair enough.
So,
however you have to justify it.
That's right. That's what I've been reading lately. But it is Arbor Day, so I did want to mention one of the top favorite books I've ever read is actually called Wild Trees, and it's by Richard Preston, and he wrote it about the Pacific Northwest and about the redwoods there. So if you're looking for a good Arbor Day book, that's one I would definitely recommend. And he's also just a really excellent nonfiction writer. He also wrote one about Ebola. I also am really interested in diseases, so I've read a lot of books about that. So Richard Preston's The Hot Zone is about outbreaks of Ebola, which again are pretty relevant right now.
Right.
So really fantastic author.
Well, can we really mention Arbor Day without mentioning one of the games in your catalog?
Yes. So, this is
I know we didn't plan this, but we got to mention this one, right?
We should mention this. So actually, we're giving away a free copy of Arboretum, our card game for people. And all you have to do is, at the end of this, Desiree is going to put a little link in there for you to fill out a form. And the secret word is trees. So if you go and fill it out, then anybody watching, any of our listeners, can get a copy of that.
A copy of it, 2 copies of it behind you right now, I think. Probably the deluxe edition and the regular one on your, right there. It's on that shelf with Icarus.
I see one of them.
Oh, there it is there too. Yeah.
I may have a lot of copies of Arboretum. I also have the
That's why there's a contest.
Yeah. Ta-da! There we go. Arboretum.
Don't be fooled, people. Don't be fooled. Hold up that cover again if you don't mind, Sarah, because it's the artwork in this game is beautiful. But don't be fooled. This game is a knife fight in a telephone booth. This is a brutal, vicious game, and I love it. It's so good. It's the decisions you're making are so tense because you've got to create a tableau in front of you, and you're going to score the trees potentially in front of you, as long as you still have in your hand the majority value in that color of tree. So there's this tension of, I want to play this tree down to the table, but now I'm giving up my market share or whatever, my majority in that color. And as you watch what your opponents are doing, you start to get worried about, do I have enough? And how many do I need to hold on to keep majority? It is, every time I play it, I get so angry in the best way, I love the tension of that game. Whoever wins this game is going to be very happy, I think. Really good one.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, if you play it, I think it has the best tiebreaker in the whole world in the back of it. So if you're playing,
you plant a tree.
Yeah, I need to go and find my tree. So my husband and I did tie in all 3 of the different ways that you can tie, and the last one.
No kidding.
If you haven't figured out who wins, and you both have to plant a tree, and whoever's tree is tallest after, I think it's 5 years, wins the game. Well, I successfully went and planted my tree at the old house we used to live at, and he never planted one. So I have to go and measure it and take a picture and post it. And yeah, that'll be exciting. I'll win finally.
You totally really should do that. And I want to see that picture on Twitter or on social media when you do it. That's awesome.
It's going to be a great conversation because I'm going to go and knock on the door and say, hello, I need to go into your backyard and take a picture of your tree. This is very important.
Hopefully they didn't remove it.
I know, right? Yeah, we'll have to see.
I put one of the Renegade games behind me here. I don't know if it can be seen on the Skype or not, but Gravwell, because I think that is the first. I think it's the first Renegade game that I featured on my channel. Watch it play. Here's a picture. Can you see that?
That was the very first Renegade game. Nice.
Yeah. So that's me. Look, I'm not wearing glasses. That's when I used to wear contacts on the show. I used to always wear a polo. The background looks a little different now, a little bit. Still the little figures back there, but
upgraded.
Yeah, Gravwell was excellent. Still is excellent. Great. The rules are not overly complicated, but it's this really interesting. I mean, the theme is what I like so much about it too, because the theme ties so well to what you're doing in the game. You've got these ships trying to escape like a black hole, and gravity's pulling them one way or pushing them another, and you're just trying to escape first with clever card play. So it's a great little game.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed playing it too. It's just really different than anything else I've played either. It's definitely a racing game where you're constantly getting defeated and be pushed in the wrong direction. Oh yeah, it's very fun. I think it's great for families too because you don't just have one person who wins every single time. There is strategy and there are things you can do better to move yourself in the right direction, but you do get messed up an awful lot so that it's kind of fun and everybody can enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's one I played on the channel with Pep and my son Luke, and we played a full game. And yeah, you can play it adults and kids. You play all adults, all kids, mix of both. It doesn't make a difference. It really works at different age groups for sure.
That's awesome. So are there any other games you've been playing with your family since you've all been kind of hanging out together?
Let me think. Everdell's one that we played recently. That's a tutorial video that I'll be releasing next week at the time of this recording anyway. So that was one we played recently. Very, charming looking game. The artwork on it's just, stunning. If you like cute animals, which I do.
Yeah, beautiful.
What else? I mean, a lot of the gameplay that I tend to do, I don't have a regular game group. I shouldn't say that. I mean, I have access to a regular game group, but I have found that the schedule of the show means that I'm typically sort of playing whatever game I'm working on next, and that's sort of where my gaming is happening right now. So usually it's with my family. I'll grab an hour or two with them. We'll play, the game so I can learn it to be able to teach it, and that's sort of how the schedule goes. I don't have a lot of sort of game days where I'm pulling older things off the shelf, but I really enjoy being able to do that when I can get those opportunities. Actually, I recently taught a friend of mine Brass Birmingham over.
I know that one. Oh, yeah, no, I do know. Yeah, I haven't played the new one.
Yeah, it's great. It's another one of those ones that, again, I don't know. I guess I like games that make me angry. It makes me angry when I'm playing it. My brain starts to sweat. I know I'm making terrible decisions and I can't do exactly what I want, but I love the tension that comes from that. And it's a beautiful production too. So yeah, that's a heavier one. But I did teach someone that over online during this little break.
That's pretty fun. Yeah, I like, even though I'm sort of in the same situation you are where I don't have any more free time than I did before, at least I'm not traveling, and I'm sure you feel the same way too, because you were traveling to a lot of conventions. So I've been trying to take that opportunity to replay some other older games that I hadn't played a lot of times, but really enjoyed. Like we played the Gallerist, my husband and I did the other day, and that was a nice, big, heavy game that took us several hours to get through. It was great. I enjoyed it the first time. I enjoyed it again.
I did a tutorial video for that one too. That's a big game, but it's got a very good rule book and it's a beautiful production. I mean, it's a stunning production, I really have been enjoying I'm a cult of the new gamer. I love playing new games. I love seeing what new ideas designers are coming up with, right? But I would say over the last 2 or 3 years, it's starting to balance out a little bit more, where I still just as much love seeing new stuff, but I get a lot of satisfaction out of being able to pull an old favorite off the shelf and play it. And when I get that downtime to play a game, that's usually what I'm doing now. I'm pulling off an older title and playing it again and diving in a little bit. And that's
Yeah.
that replaying a game is, I think, where you really discover kind of its secrets, if you will. Like the first time you play a game, you might feel like, oh, I get what this game is all about. And you sort of do. But once you played it 5, 6, 7 times, you maybe start to see kind of the patterns and the strategies and things you didn't know or hadn't discovered yet, and that can be a fun thing to kind of uncover, which we don't always get. We're playing tons of new games all the time.
I completely agree. We actually played the Gallerist back-to-back twice in a row because of exactly what you just said. We got through it and we finally understood all the rules, and we didn't want to put it away again.
Yeah. Once you'd invested all that learning time, look, we are going to play this at least one more time.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think is going to be the rest of this year? Like, how do you think this is going to look without having conventions to go to and be introduced to these new games? How do you think we as board gamers in our community can help each other find new stuff that's coming out? Because I assume publishers, especially at this time of year, have already made, produced, in a lot of the times even shipped all these new games that are coming out. How do we find them? Any ideas?
I mean, I think that, and this isn't self-promotion, it's gonna sound like it, but I think because we can't go to the physical locations like conventions that maybe we were doing before, or not only conventions, but to the stores, right? It is going to drive us online, I think, to our favorite YouTube channels or websites, board game. I'm sure Board Game Geek right now is getting traffic hits like it's never gotten before in a lot of ways. It's probably, I know for myself, usually around Christmas time, right? There'll be a big spike in views as people are getting gifts, and so they're coming to learn how to play games. I'm seeing a very similar spike right now. And I think it's because a lot of people are discovering games again because they're looking for activities to do with their friends and family, especially in the house. And board games are a great hobby for them to be diving into. So I think
honestly, one reason why we wanted you on the show here this week was because I think that we're also going to see a huge influx of brand new gamers who have never experienced this whole hobby before, because we suddenly are missing out on sports. We don't have those as an entertainment outlet. New movies, nobody's filming right now, so there's going to be sort of a blank spot of movies coming in the fall, and we can't go to theaters right now. Sort of staying inside, so a lot of outdoor activities have been halted. So board games are like the last bastion of entertainment, of things to do together.
Board games and puzzles. Puzzles too, I think, are seeing a little surge.
Section of my shelf of puzzles down there too. And so, yeah, I think it's an awesome opportunity for anyone who's currently in the board game industry, or even just as a gamer, to introduce our love of this cool thing to people who are looking for another entertainment option right now. And I think you have spent most of your career doing that, which is pretty cool. So I'm hoping more people find out about board games through you, and then be able to introduce them to their families and have something that they can really enjoy that uses a little bit of brain power while we're all sitting around at home.
Yeah, that's definitely certainly one of my hopes. Actually, the NBC reached out this week. They were doing an article for their Today Digital, and they were just looking for some advice on what some games that people can play over Zoom or Skype or whatever, right? So even these bigger platforms are seeing that this is an area that people are looking to for some in-home entertainment, or even sometimes out of home. We were having a video conference with our family, our extended family here, and oftentimes they will look to me for a game or something to play, right? And I found a little something I could break out and just play right there, teach in a few seconds, and everyone could play. And so we had 9 of us on Zoom or whatever playing a game. And I think a lot of people are looking for those sort of things, right? And hopefully, not only will they find that this hobby is great during a situation like this, but they'll discover, I kind of want to keep playing these games and see what else is out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we'll see that, but it's kind of a good time for all of us to be good stewards of board games, and you certainly have been teaching us how to do that for a long time, so thank you.
No, you're very welcome. That's kind of you to say. Appreciate that.
So one more thing I had on my list that I've been asking everyone, including my one previous guest, So I I don't cook a lot, and I've been forced to learn how to do that a little bit more at home. So, what is your staple, easy to cook food item that you have been enjoying the last month or so?
Well, I would have to say this is not going to be very exciting. It's not going to be thrilling by any means, but tacos. Tacos are an easy thing to make. You know, you just get a little ground beef, you cook that up, you get some of your favorite vegetables, a couple of favorite sauces, and toss it. The kids like it, I like it, and it takes, it's like maybe a half an hour, if that, to
Pretty
put together.
good.
And it's easy enough. You can buy like a kit if you want, like a shortcut. So that tends to be my go-to. That and peanut butter and banana sandwiches. I don't know if that classifies as high culture, but.
Hey, that sounds simple and easy. I like it.
Yeah.
That's definitely a go-to. Exciting. Awesome. Well, I did have just a few little Renegade things going on. I did want to remind everybody that
Sure.
if you fill out that form, put in the secret word trees, then you get signed up to potentially win a free copy of Arboretum. If you already have Arboretum and you're looking for another good celebration of Earth Day / Arbor Day this week, we also have Stellar, which is one of our new games, and you get to be an astronomer, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's a 2-player only game, so it works out pretty well for most people right now.
I've been hearing really good things about that. My friend Marty over at Rolling Dice Taking Names, he played it, loved it. Him and his wife really, really enjoyed that game. So it looks like a good one.
It's very puzzly. I think if you're the type of person who likes Arboretum, you would also like this one quite a bit.
Nice.
It's very good that way. So yeah, definitely recommend that one. And we have a ton of announcements for upcoming things that are coming out kind of in the fall in Gen Con time zone, whether or not Gen Con happens, which of course we're all sort of waiting on pins and needles to find out at this point. We are still at least going to have a lot of new games coming out around that time. So check out all of our announcements. We have some neat things like Wordlings coming out that will be easy to play online. So we encourage people to go and see what we've got going on. But that's about it for me. Desiree, did you have any fantastic fan questions that we should hit Rodney with before?
Yeah, so I have, there weren't too many. You had a lot of praise in the comments, Rodney.
Oh, that's very nice.
So,
Thanks, everybody.
someone
Very
did
kind.
ask if there was going to be a spin-off of Watch It Played for a Watch It Painted, I guess.
I love it. It's fun.
It's funny. I would enjoy doing a little spin-off, like an episode or two, just because I think painting miniatures can be very intimidating. It feels like, where do you start? Now, look, there's lots of great YouTube videos out there already of people teaching other people how to paint miniatures. So there's lots of resources for that. But, the thing I've discovered is no matter how much there is out there, there's always somebody who discovers something for the first time from some new source, right? So I have thought, like, could I give sort of the Rodney method in an episode or two of how to paint miniatures? Maybe. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. If I get some downtime from the board game videos, maybe I'll do a little miniature painting too.
Awesome.
There we go.
And then any recommendations for free online multiplayer gaming?
Ooh, free. Well, yes. There are services like, free. Free is tricky. Tabletopia does have some free games that you can play. I think, I could be wrong, don't quote me, but I believe Viticulture on their site is one that you can play for free. A number of their other games require a subscription to jump into, but I think that one is. I think there are some other companies, though. Everdell, for example, which I mentioned earlier, I believe that company announced today that a couple of their games on Tabletopia, they're making free to play for the foreseeable future. I think a number of companies are trying to find ways to help people be able to continue engaging with their hobby, even if they don't have as many people to play. I recently did a video for Empires of the North teaching the solo rules. Normally, I leave the solo rules for everyone to discover on their own. And so Portal partnered with me to create the solo rules portion of the tutorial for people who like to play it that way. And we are seeing more of that, right? More publishers are thinking, what games in our catalog are good for this kind of time, and either releasing some free online elements for it, or just promoting it, that way.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Makes sense.
And then Let's see. From Victor, when you're explaining games to people, do you have a particular way of doing it? Or you like to do it?
Well, Victor, yeah, I do have a particular way. I'll try to give you the sort of brief summary of it. Generally, and some people say always start with the objective. What are we here trying to do? I, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but that isn't generally where I start. I will usually start with a theme. I will try to give people a feeling for the world that we're about to enter. You know, if it's Mansions of Madness, I'm going to talk about how we're investigators have been called to uncover some kind of mystery, or maybe it'd be something like, look, we're generals leading an army into battle, or whatever. I try to give some sort of sense of the theme. Then I usually will give people a tour of the components of the game. Usually I like to have it sort of set up in advance, and I'll try to give people a tour of the elements. Because if I say what the objective is, and I haven't established the theme, and I haven't really talked about the components in front of me, I'm not sure that the objective really means a whole lot. It's like maybe too abstract at that point. So I like to give people a little bit of a foundation about the physical components of the game and the thematic element of it. And then I say, okay, now here's the objective. Here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn these resources that are over here so that we can generate victory points over here, and the person with the most victory points wins. And then after that, I really try to follow kind of a linear progression of teaching the game. I try to think, well, what's the first thing that a person's likely to do on their turn? And I try to go through sort of step by step. And the real challenge, honestly, with teaching a game is that typically, if you were to sit alone and learn a game, it might take you 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, depending on the game, right? Maybe even more. But when you're sitting down to teach people to play a game, they're kind of expecting you to know how to start playing in 10 minutes, if they're feeling charitable, right? If they're feeling charitable, they might give you 10 minutes. So there is, the other thing I like to do is I like to prep people before the teach begins. I really don't like trying to trick people. Like, if I think the game's complicated, I will just say up front, this is a complicated game. We're probably going to need about 20 minutes to really get a handle on the rules before we can play. Anyone who does not want to make that commitment, I completely understand. Please feel free to go join another table. Like, no harm, no foul. It's your life and your time, right? But I try to give people the opportunity to bail so that they kind of have bought in to the 20 minutes that it might take to learn the game, before we get started, But yeah, that's generally the tips. I mean, I think the other tip is you have to have patience. You have to have patience with people. You're going to get questions. You're going to be asked something that you explained already. And I think people can pick up pretty quickly when you're getting annoyed. And that never sets a good tone, And so I think patience and empathy and trying to put yourself in the person's shoes. Remember, they have not played the game yet. And you have to remember what it's like to not remember how to play the game. A lot of people, they go, well, it's obvious. You do this. Well, it's obvious because you've played it 5 times already, but it's not obvious to the person who's playing for the first time. So there's a jumbled bunch of tips for you, Victor.
Awesome. I do have just, I don't want to keep us too long, but I have like 1 or 2 more questions. But before I do, just to clarify for the game that people are trying to win, it's actually Paladins today.
I'm so sorry, but how about this? Can we give away a copy of Arboretum too?
Sure. We can
do that.
We can talk to Terry and make sure that happens.
Nice.
So then, yeah, there we go.
We'll just do both. Why not? It is Arbor Day after all.
True.
I feel like we should do that. Yeah, well, Paladins is awesome. That's even like a bigger prize. So that's pretty exciting.
Right.
They're both
awesome. All right, I just
Perfect.
wanted to make sure to clarify because some people were asking about it. So, so Rodney, will you be doing any more solo role games?
Well, actually, I generally don't pre-announce what I'm going to be doing or not doing because sometimes my schedule changes and I always feel bad about potentially changing my schedule. Uh-oh, I've lost audio.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
No, you're back.
Okay.
You're back. You're fine. I got talking so long, it like cut your. Yeah, no, it's fine. It just got quiet. So, but I can tell you this: I am going to be doing a video that teaches people how to play the game Villainous over video conferencing.
Cute.
So, here's an
Nice.
ideal way to set it up. Here's a few rules adjustments that you have to make, and then and also some tips and tricks about how to make the experience more enjoyable for everyone involved. So it'll apply to Villainous, but also to any other game you might try to play kind of remotely with family or friends. So that's the only one I can think of right off the top of my head that isn't solo, mind you, but it might allow you to interact and play multiplayer games with other folks as well, as long as everyone has a copy of that particular game.
Cool.
Nice.
And then, greetings from Nova Scotia. A huge fan
Hey.
and longtime viewer here.
Hometown.
Yeah. Congratulations on being the Dice Tower's number 11 choice on their list of the biggest influences in modern gaming.
Yeah.
Do you play tabletop
Hey.
RPGs much?
Well, I talked earlier about this game, Labyrinth, right? And I don't really play a lot of role-playing games. This is one I was invited to play, and thankfully the other person kind of did all the heavy lifting, prepared the adventure for us, and I just had to show up. But after playing it, I bought this because I felt like, you know what, I think maybe I could run something like this. I also have, over on my shelf, you can't see it here, but I have like every D&D book from 5th edition. I've bought all of them, and I've played none of them. But don't shame me, because we've all got a few games in our collection. Come on now, be honest, that we've bought and haven't played. Because I want to play role-playing games, but I'm not going to say I don't have the time. Because a lot of times people say they don't have the time. What they really mean is I'm just not prioritizing that particular activity. And that's basically what it's been. I haven't been able to prioritize that particular activity. But I'm going to stop buying books now because I got enough of them. But I like looking through them. I like the lore, the artwork, and I like the idea of someday being able to play a little more D&D. So, but no, I don't play a lot of it. But the few times I have played role-playing games, I've really enjoyed the experience, and I want to have a role-playing game kind of within reach for that opportunity when I get a chance to do it again.
Nice.
Nice. Well, that sounds very exciting. There are definitely a few really good ones out there. It sounds like you at least found one, so maybe that'll open up the door for you.
Yeah. Well, and Renegade has their own role-playing game as well, right? Overlight, yes?
Yeah, so we've got Overlight. Another one I would recommend if you're just starting and like that world-building experience is Kids on Bikes. And we just last week announced Kids on Brooms.
It's on
so
Brooms.
If you like, if you like wizards and witches and spell slinging, then we've got it for you. There's also Teens in Space, and another one that's coming out from us very soon that's powered by that same system. So all those games work on the same really basic system. Another one is Junior Braves, The Guide to the Apocalypse. And so essentially the story is based off a graphic novel series where these Boy Scouts go out into the wilderness, have a wonderful time, do Boy Scout things, and then they come back to civilization and nobody is there. So they don't have their families to help them do regular things in life, and they have to navigate this new world just with their own troop. So really interesting choices that you have to make as a group, and a good way to get everybody together and try and solve these problems that you run into. But all with that really wide open world experience, so you can really do whatever you want with that. But it's all built, like I said, on the Kids on Bikes system, so that would be a good place to start. And we also have Wordlings coming out, and it's based on D&D 5th edition rules. So if you like the D&D system, you can play Wordlings using the figures from WizKids, and it's built more for either newer or younger generation of players, and everybody gets a little animal familiar, which is super cute. And I really like too that you start out as a character that has a lot of magical power at the very beginning, and then as you progress through the story, you lose a little bit of magical power but gain strength every time you level up. And so you get to experience a wide variety of what D&D has to offer as you play through the whole thing. And
is it self-contained, Sarah? Is this an add-on for D&D, or is it its own thing? Like you could just buy that and play?
So it's sort of in between those two things. So it's a setting, but then also it has its own system and rules that are on top of D&D 5th edition. Okay. So it uses D&D 5th edition as the basis and then just adds a few things to make it work.
Okay.
So yeah, really neat though, beautiful world. It's by Elisa Teague, and she's a really well-known designer in the RPG world, very active, great lady. And then the cover artwork is from Jackie Davis, who has done quite a few things for us, like Ex Libris is hers. She's just a wonderful artist. So it's a very beautiful
amazing.
Yeah. So that's coming out in May, actually. And if you want, I'll send you a copy of it.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Nice. And you can just read it and then put it on your D&D shelf.
Exactly. Oh, no. It'll be on the shelf. Chris will go, is that another book?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know lots of people who just read D&D books and then put them away. And that's all right with me.
Yes.
It's a lot like painting your miniatures and then putting them back in the box. That's
right. And then putting them on a little shelf. Yeah.
I think your little shelf. That's super cute.
This was a gift from a friend. I think it's actually meant to sit this way. I don't know exactly what it's for, but I looked at it and said, "Oh, this is a miniature shelf."
It is.
No.
It's a miniature shelf.
Yeah.
Super cute. Well, thank you so much for spending so much time with us. It was great to chat and just see you because it's good to see people right now.
It was good for me too. It was nice to connect, and I hope we get to connect in person soon. Of course, I also hope that everyone, keeps their distance until we get this thing under control, and then when we are able to meet each other again, it'll be safe and everyone will be healthy, and it'll be nice to see everyone then. But it's been nice to sort of virtually meet up again, Sarah, this way.
It's been great. I definitely appreciate it more than I would have before. I think so. Same
here. And nice to be able to spend time with your viewers here as well. Thanks to all of them for joining and watching. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you, Desiree, for moderating our chat too, and everybody watching. We couldn't do it without.
Of course, so. I do have one request. Can you say the code word one last time?
Trees.
Awesome. Thank you.
Code word trees. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Rodney. It's wonderful to see you. And I will hopefully see you all again soon. And we will be back next week at 5 o'clock Mountain Time, which nobody knows what that is. So 4 o'clock Pacific next week on Friday. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.